She's just our personal ATM, my family bragged after abandoning me for 8 years. Christmas reunion ended right away. Now they're paying me every penny. I'm 26. I've spent the last few years meticulously constructing a life from the ground up. I work in marketing, a small but respected firm where I've carved out a niche for myself. My 2-bedroom apartment in the city isn't lavish, but it's mine, something I paid for with my own hard-earned money. After years of scraping by, working 3 jobs simultaneously during college, sharing cramped apartments with too many roommates, and enduring countless sleepless nights wondering if I'd made the right choice leaving home, I had finally reached a place of stability. Not wealth, not extravagance, just stability. And that meant more to me than my family could ever understand. I remember rushing home with the acceptance letter from State University, a good school with an excellent marketing program. My hands trembled with excitement as I spread the letter on our kitchen table. I got in, I announced, unable to keep the pride from my voice, and I got a partial scholarship. My mother glanced at the letter, then returned to chopping vegetables. That's nice, dear. Did you see Amy's invitation samples came today? We need to finalize the guest list for her wedding. The wedding? For the past year, it has become the center of our family universe. Amy had met her fiancé during her senior year of college, and their whirlwind romance had culminated in an engagement that my parents celebrated as though it were a royal union. Mom, did you hear me? I got into college. Of course, I heard you. Her knife tapped a steady rhythm against the cutting board. But you know we can't afford to send you right now. Amy's wedding is in June, and we've already committed to handling most of the expenses. What about Grandma's money? I asked, my throat tightening. She left that specifically for our education. I know there's enough for at least my first year. My mother's knife stilled. Sarah, that money, she sighed heavily. That money is gone. We had to use it for the down payment on Amy's house as a wedding gift. You know how important it is for them to start their marriage on solid footing. The room seemed to tilt slightly. My grandmother had left money for both Amy and me to attend college. I had been counting on it, planning on it since I was 14 when Grandma had shown me the account statements and made me promise to use it wisely. But Grandma wanted. Your grandmother would understand that family priorities change, my father interjected, entering the kitchen with Amy's wedding binder tucked under his arm. Amy and Thomas need that house. You can take out loans for school or start at community college. Plenty of successful people start that way. I remember staring at them, these people who were supposed to love me equally, who were supposed to champion my future the same way they championed Amy's. In that moment, I realized a fundamental truth. In their eyes, my sister's wedding was more important than my education, her happiness more valuable than my future. That night, I called my Aunt Lisa, my mother's younger sister and the black sheep of the family. Unlike my parents, Lisa had always seen me, really see me. She'd attended my art exhibits when my parents were too busy, had taken me for ice cream after my first heartbreak, had been the only one to frame my state competition certificate. They spent my college money on Amy's house, I told her, my voice breaking. They didn't even ask me, they just decided. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I thought we'd been disconnected. Then, pack a bag, I'm coming to get you. The fight that erupted when Aunt Lisa arrived at our house still echoes in my nightmares. Words like ungrateful, dramatic, and selfish were hurled at me like stones. My mother accused Lisa of putting ideas in my head, as though my hurt was an external infection rather than a wound they had inflicted. Amy stood in the doorway of her bedroom, watching silently as I dragged my suitcase down the stairs. If you leave now, don't expect us to welcome you back with open arms, my father warned, his face flushed with anger. I remember pausing at the front door, looking back at the 3 of them, my mother's face twisted with something between rage and confusion, my father's rigid disapproval, Amy's blank stare. You never welcomed me with open arms anyway, I said quietly and followed Aunt Lisa to her car. The next 4 years were a blur of hard work and determination. I lived with Aunt Lisa while attending community college, working evenings at a coffee shop and weekends at a local marketing firm as an unpaid intern. When I finally transferred to State University for my junior and senior years, I juggled multiple jobs to afford tuition and housing. During those years, contact with my parents dwindled to obligatory birthday calls and the occasional text message. I didn't attend Amy's wedding. I wasn't invited to the hospital when my niece was born. Christmas invitations were extended with such transparent reluctance that I found it easier to decline. Aunt Lisa became my family, her apartment my home base during school breaks. I graduated with honors, landed an entry-level position at Mercer and Reed, and slowly built a life that was entirely my own. Each promotion, each raise, each tiny victory was savored as proof that I didn't need my parents' support to succeed. The lingering ache of their betrayal never fully disappeared, but it dulled with time, becoming a familiar background noise rather than an acute pain. Until that Tuesday in November when my mother's voice on the phone reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. "Sarah, are you still there?" Her voice crackled through the speaker. "Yeah, I'm here." I closed my laptop, the presentation forgotten. "I don't think Thanksgiving is a good idea, Mom. Please, just consider it. Your father and we'd really like to see you. It's been so long and the kids are getting big. Amy asks about you all the time." I almost laughed at that. Amy, who hadn't reached out once in 8 years, was supposedly asking about me all the time. "I have plans," I lied. In reality, I'd been intending to spend the holiday with Aunt Lisa as I had every year since leaving home. "Lisa is invited too," my mother added quickly as though reading my mind. "We want the whole family together. It's important to us." There was something in her voice, a tremor, a hesitation that gave me pause. In 8 years, this was the first time she'd suggested including Aunt Lisa in a family gathering. Lisa had been persona non grata since the night she helped me leave. "I'll think about it," I conceded, more to end the conversation than from any real intention of attending, but the call lingered in my mind. That weekend, over coffee with Aunt Lisa, I mentioned the invitation. "They invited me too," she confirmed, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "First time in nearly a decade." "You're not actually considering going, are you?" The idea seemed absurd. Lisa had been there for the aftermath, the tears, the rage, the gradual rebuilding of my self-worth. "I think we should both go." Her expression was serious, her eyes holding mine. "Something's changed, Sarah. Your mother called me last week and she was different, reflective." She mentioned regrets. "So what? They're suddenly sorry after 8 years of silence? That doesn't undo what they did." "No, it doesn't." Lisa reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "But people can change, and if they haven't, if this is just another disappointment waiting to happen, wouldn't you rather know for certain? Wouldn't you rather close that door completely instead of wondering what might have been?" Lisa's words haunted me over the next few days. The truth was, despite everything, a small part of me still yearned for reconciliation. Not because I needed my parents' approval anymore, but because there was a hollow space inside me where family should have been, a space that Aunt Lisa filled as best she could, but that sometimes echoed with emptiness. After a week of internal debate, I called my mother back and agreed to come for Thanksgiving with Lisa as my buffer and support. The relief in my mother's voice was palpable, which only deepened my suspicion. What had prompted this sudden desire for reunion? Walking up the familiar driveway, seeing the house where I'd grown up but never truly belonged, I felt a dizzying sense of disorientation. 8 years had changed me fundamentally, but the colonial-style house with its pale blue shutters remained frozen in time, a physical manifestation of all my childhood insecurities. The tension hit me like a physical force as I stepped into the house, clutching my pie like a shield. There they were, my father, his hair now completely gray, Amy, still beautiful but somehow subdued, her husband Thomas, whom I'd never officially met, and 2 children. The weight of all that had passed between us and all that hadn't hung in the air, thickening it until it seemed difficult to breathe. My mother moved around nervously, offering drinks, complimenting my outfit, my hair, the pie, a stream of pleasantries that did nothing to address the elephant in the room. Amy approached with careful steps, introducing her children. The little girl, Lily, mentioned that her mother kept pictures of me in her study, a revelation that didn't align with the narrative I'd constructed over the years, the story of a sister who had been content to let me disappear from her life. Dinner was a masterclass in strained conversation. We discussed safe topics, the weather, the children's school activities, my aunt's gardening hobby. No one mentioned my job, my apartment, my life, as though acknowledging my independence might shatter the fragile veneer of normalcy. My father had barely spoken 3 words to me since my arrival, his eyes darting away whenever I looked in his direction. Amy spoke too brightly, too quickly, filling silences before they could grow dangerous. When my mother asked me to help her in the kitchen, I followed with trepidation. Once we were alone, she revealed the truth that had been hovering at the edges of my awareness since I'd arrived. She had cancer, stage 3, and had been in treatment for 6 months. The prognosis was uncertain. My mother explained that facing mortality had clarified things for her. She acknowledged the favoritism, the dismissal of my dreams, the betrayal with my grandmother's money. There was no excuse, she admitted, only regret and a desperate desire to make amends before it was too late. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process this unexpected confession. For years, I'd imagined confronting my parents, forcing them to acknowledge their favoritism, their betrayal. But in my imagined scenarios, their admission came grudgingly, defensively, not like this, not with my mother's shoulders shaking with silent sobs in the kitchen while Thanksgiving dinner grew cold in the next room. She explained that my father's inability to look at me stemmed partly from fear of her illness, but mostly from shame. He didn't know how to apologize, had never known how. The irony struck me that it had taken my mother's illness to force this reckoning, this fragile opportunity for healing. I couldn't promise forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever completely. What they had done had changed the course of my life. But I could offer time to listen, time to watch, time to decide whether a new relationship could be built from the ashes of the old one. When we returned to the dining room, my father looked up as I set the pie on the table, his eyes finally meeting mine. He noted quietly that I had remembered his favorite, butterscotch. The simple observation carried the weight of 8 years of silence. As we sat around the table, this broken, imperfect family of mine, I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible or what form it might take. I didn't know how much time my mother had, or if my father would ever find the words to express his regret. Update 1. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, everything changed. I had settled into a cautious rhythm of reconnecting with my family, our relationship fragile but hopeful. Every other day, I would call my mother to check in about her treatments. On weekends, I'd visit with groceries or prepared meals, things to make her life easier as she navigated the exhausting routine of chemotherapy and doctor appointments. Seeing her physically diminished, her once robust frame now gaunt, her thick hair reduced to wisps beneath colorful scarves, reinforced my decision to set aside old hurts, at least temporarily. My father remained awkward around me, but he was trying in his own hesitant way. He'd leave the sports section of the newspaper folded for me when I visited, remembering how I'd always grab it first as a teenager. He'd ask stilted questions about my job, his brow furrowing in concentration as I explained marketing campaigns and client acquisitions. Once, he even showed me an old photo album he'd unearthed from the attic, pointing to pictures of me in high school art competitions he'd never attended but had apparently known about. Amy was making efforts too, inviting me to her children's school performances and soccer games. Lily had taken an immediate liking to me, fascinated by her previously unknown aunt with the cool city apartment and fancy marketing job. Even little James had warmed up, shyly showing me his dinosaur collection during my 3rd visit. But the most surprising development was how quickly I found myself becoming the family's support system. It started small, driving my mother to appointments when my father was at work or Amy was busy with the kids. Then came the prescription pickups, the grocery runs, the house cleaning my mother could no longer manage. One evening, as I was preparing to leave after dropping off a week's worth of pre-made meals, my father approached me about financial concerns. The medical bills had arrived, and insurance wasn't covering as much as they'd anticipated. Without hesitation, I wrote a check for $2,000, a significant chunk of my savings, but worth it if it helped ease my mother's burden during this difficult time. The relief on my father's face made any financial pinch worthwhile. That first check opened a floodgate. Within days, Amy called about a plumbing emergency at their house. The kids needed new winter clothes, and with all the money going toward Mom's care, they were stretched thin. My father mentioned the mortgage payment was coming due, and with his reduced hours to care for Mom, they were falling behind. I didn't question any of it. Instead, I dipped deeper into my savings, transferred money for Amy's plumbing repair, ordered clothes online for the kids, and sent another check for the mortgage payment. I even started a spreadsheet to track my contributions, telling myself I would figure out how to rebuild my savings later. What mattered now was family. By mid-December, I had contributed nearly $8,000 to various family needs. My carefully constructed emergency fund was dwindling, and I'd even dipped into my $401k once, something I never thought I'd do. But I rationalized it as the right thing to do. After years of distance, wasn't this my chance to prove I cared, to be the daughter and sister they needed? I made other sacrifices too. I'd been planning a much-needed vacation, my first in 3 years, but canceled it to stay close to home for my mother. The promotion I'd been working toward took a backseat as I reduced my hours at work to accommodate family responsibilities. My tiny apartment became a way station more than a home, a place to sleep between family obligations. My friends noticed the change. My college roommate commented on my exhausted appearance during a coffee meetup, asking if everything was okay with my mom's treatments. I assured her everything was fine, just tiring. What I didn't say was how strange it felt to be suddenly so enmeshed with the family that had once pushed me away. How part of me was gratified by their need, even as another part whispered warnings about boundaries crossed and red flags ignored. Even Aunt Lisa seemed concerned when I canceled our weekly dinner to help Amy with the kids. She remarked that I was doing a lot for them, maybe too much. I reminded her about my mother's cancer, perhaps a touch defensively. She gave me a long look but didn't press the issue. In retrospect, I should have paid more attention to her concern. The weekend before Christmas, I drove to my parents' house with arms full of wrapped packages, gifts for everyone but especially the children. Despite the financial strain, I'd wanted to make the holiday special for them. They shouldn't suffer because of adult complications, I reasoned. The house was eerily quiet when I arrived. No Christmas music playing, no delicious smells from the kitchen. After calling out and receiving no answer, I made my way toward the back of the house where muffled voices emanated from my father's study. I wasn't intending to eavesdrop. I was about to announce my presence when I heard my name. "Sarah's been more generous than we expected," my father was saying. "At this rate, we'll have enough for the down payment by February." "I still feel bad about the cancer story," my mother replied, her voice strong and clear, nothing like the weakened tones she used when I was around. "But we had to do something dramatic to get her back here after all this time." "It worked, didn't it?" Amy's voice now pragmatic and cool. "She's practically throwing money at us. The kids' college funds are getting a nice boost." The packages slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, the heavy thud announcing my presence. 3 faces turned toward me as I appeared in the doorway of the study, my mother healthy and vibrant without a hint of illness, my father pale with shock, and Amy unable to meet my gaze. The confrontation that followed was brief but devastating. I confirmed what I had already realized. There was no cancer, no medical bills, no true need for the mortgage payment or plumbing repairs. It had all been an elaborate scheme to extract money from me, with my mother's fictitious illness as the emotional lever to ensure my compliance. $8,000, that was how much I had contributed since Thanksgiving. Money from my savings, money I had worked multiple jobs to earn while putting myself through college after they had spent my education fund on Amy's house. When I mentioned that I knew they had been calling me their personal ATM behind my back, their startled expressions confirmed my suspicion. My father tried to salvage the situation with promises to repay me, but I made it clear that it had never been about the money. It was about believing they had finally seen me, valued me for who I was rather than what I could give them. With that final statement, I walked away from their protests, a strange mixture of grief and relief washing over me as I drove away. Aunt Lisa was waiting at her apartment when I arrived, having suspected something wasn't right about the situation. As I collapsed onto her couch, the numbness began to recede, replaced by a white-hot anger that trembled in my voice as I recounted everything I'd discovered. I lamented that they had stolen from me again, not just money this time, but my compassion, hope, and belief that people could change. Lisa disagreed gently, pointing out that while they had tried to take those things, they belonged to me. They couldn't take them unless I allowed it. When I questioned how I could trust anyone after this betrayal, she advised me to start by trusting myself, my instincts, boundaries, and worth. That night, as I lay on Lisa's pull-out couch staring at the ceiling, I reflected on the stark difference between my family's betrayal and Lisa's steadfast support. She had never asked for anything in return for taking me in or helping me build a life on my own terms. She had always seen me clearly, neither idealizing nor diminishing who I was. By morning, I had made my decision. I drafted a brief, businesslike email to my parents and Amy, detailing exactly how much money I had contributed and requesting repayment within 30 days, noting that I would pursue legal action if necessary. Then I blocked their numbers, removed them from my social media, and went to work. Update 2. The aftermath wasn't easy. The pain of their betrayal cut deep, particularly because I had allowed myself to hope for genuine reconciliation. There were nights of tears, mornings of anger, and moments of muscle memory when I would reach for the phone to check on my mother before remembering there was nothing to check on. But gradually, I began to rebuild. I took on extra projects at work to replenish my savings. I reconnected with neglected friends. I even rescheduled my canceled vacation, a small act of self-care that felt strangely rebellious. Lisa remained my anchor, offering wisdom when asked but mostly providing quiet solidarity, reminding me that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who shows up, who sees you, who chooses you consistently. 3 weeks after Christmas, a certified check arrived for the full amount I had requested, $8,126.42. No note, no explanation, just the money. I felt no satisfaction as I deposited it, only hollow confirmation of what I already knew. In their eyes, I had been nothing more than a financial resource, a relationship reduced to a transaction. The process of rebuilding myself after this second betrayal continues daily. Doubt occasionally creeps in. Was I too harsh, too unforgiving? Should I have given them another chance? But then I remember the casual discussion of using me, the elaborate lie about cancer, the years of emotional manipulation, and I know I made the only choice I could for my own well-being. What I've learned is that forgiveness isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's about acknowledging what happened, feeling the pain, and choosing to move forward without carrying that burden. I'm not there yet with my parents or Amy, but I'm working toward it, not for their sake, but for mine. In the meantime, I'm building a chosen family, people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide, people who see me clearly and love me regardless, people who show up consistently without hidden agendas. That's what family should be about, not blood or obligation or history, but choice. The daily choice to see each other, support each other, and be honest with each other. The choice to love without manipulation or condition. I don't know if my birth family will ever make that choice where I'm concerned, but I've made it for myself, and that's enough for now, more than enough.